Thank you guys for joining us tonight. I just want to say thank you. My name is Dr. Chad Carpenter. I am live from the Marquardt Ranch in Sisterdale, Texas. I am a fellow Doctor of Chiropractic, and also your TCA President. And it's an honor for me to be serving you guys today. And I'm excited to welcome everyone to tonight's TCA Town Hall Live. TCA members, non-members, other invited guests, and friends of TCA, thank you guys for joining us. As you know, we've just finished up the 86th state legislature. It wrapped up last month, and that's really the title of tonight's Town Hall of 2019 Texas Legislative Session Wrap, and what TCA and Chiropractic achieved in Austin. I'm sure you guys would like to know that. TCA Vice President Dr. Jahadi and our TCA lobbyist Josh Massingill. Can you guys look at the camera and say, hey, what's up? And Kaden Norton, both of them are from StateCraft. They're going to talk about TCA's big win during the session and a little bit about the year, the near misses, and there were a couple of near misses. And a lot of things happen in Austin during this time of year. And we're glad to have these guys on our team, and we're glad to be moving forward with them in the future. Most importantly, we will tell you what all of this means for you as a Texas chiropractor and how we get started today to prepare for our next legislative session in 2021. This year, my year, in the next 12 months, we're going to be focused on getting our membership back up, getting our funds back up in our account so that we can continue this fight. And so we're excited to be here. We also found out some good news last Friday. We were informed that the Supreme Court of Texas has agreed to a full briefing in the TCA versus the TBCE versus the TMA lawsuit. We're not suing the TBCE. We're trying to help the TBCE against their lawsuit with TMA. This opens the door for the Supreme Court to hear our case. The outcome could impact our ability to treat nerve-related conditions. And we are thrilled to have TCA's lead attorney, Matt Wood, on this town hall to discuss why we're here today and what we're doing today and what the next steps in this process are. So please make sure, as we get started, please make sure that your phone is on mute. There will also be plenty of time to answer questions. Any of your questions, just type them in as we go, and we will get to them. And so before we get started, I have two brief announcements. One, the TCA Tour of Texas. Our roadshow across Texas is starting up again in August. It's the best place to get TCA legislative and legal updates and network with your fellow DCs. If you haven't been to one yet, please don't miss it. The Berquist Law Firm has been great to us and has treated chiropractors probably better than any other sponsor has ever treated chiropractors, probably across the U.S. They've been really good to us, and I want to make sure that we're representing them well as well. We have events planned in Abilene, Amarillo, Beaumont, Corpus Christi, El Paso, Houston, Laredo, Lubbock, Midland, Odessa, the Woodlands, and Tyler. So stay tuned for updates and venues, and we'll get those dates and venues to you guys as soon as possible. And thank you so much to our exclusive TCA Tour sponsor, the Berquist Law Firm. I just want to say thank you, and I can't say thank you enough. As we move forward, Chiro Texpo in 2019 took place earlier this month at the Hyatt Regency in Dallas. It was awesome. We had great speakers, and the sessions and Texpo floor was busy. A big thank you to everyone who attended. If you missed, please try to put down next year's date. It's one way that you can support us as an association. I know you have a lot of choices, but we really would like you to choose TCA's events to keep us the support. And on your calendar next year, June 12th through 14th, is at the Embassy Suites in Frisco. And so if you're planning to be there, consider upgrading your TCA membership to Premium, which includes your discounted registration at Chiro Texpo. It's a great deal, so call the TCA office to update and upgrade your membership. Now let's shift our legislative wrap to look back at the 2019 session. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Jahadi, our TCA Vice President and a key member of our TCA legislative team. Also, let's welcome Josh Massingill and Kaden Norton of StateCraft. They've represented TCA so well the past 3 years, as our lobbyists, and we appreciate all that they do for our profession. And let me remind you, if you have any questions, just start marking those questions in the chat box, and we will answer those in order. Go for it, guys.
Well, thank you, Dr. Carpenter. To everyone watching, thank you. I think I speak for both of us. We really appreciate the opportunity to represent TCA and chiropractic at the Capitol. We really feel like we're a part of the family, and that's a testament to all of you. So thank you very much for this opportunity. So we wanted to walk through a little bit of kind of what happened this session, and I think generally some of that starts with just some of the kind of statistics. I'm a numbers guy, so I've got some statistics on the PowerPoint here for you. So I won't read everything to you, but there were a lot of bills filed this session. As you can see, it's the second most number of bills filed in the last 10 legislative sessions. Only 1,429 of the 7,324 bills passed, though. And so this past session was generally pretty slow. This was the second lowest bill passage rate in the past 10 sessions. So going back 20 years, this was the second lowest. Last session was actually the slowest and fewest bills passed. And I'd have just as a note there, kind of a little anecdote, the legislature can be a lot more productive than it was this session. So going back about 20 years, bill passage rate was almost 29%. This session, it was just a shade under 20%. So anyways, that kind of frames a little bit of how the session felt. I think, if you polled a lot of lobbyists here in Austin, they'd tell you that this just felt like a really slow session. You want to speak to that a little bit, Josh?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that you feel not just at the end of session when it's complete, but also during session, because when you're asking senators or representatives to do you a favor, they're saying, look, man, I haven't had any of our bills moving. It's not just your bill. I've got lots of problems. And so it makes it hard. It definitely felt like it was grinding pretty slowly. And when we kind of evaluate maybe why that is, there's a couple things we can point to. One, the House of Representatives had a new speaker. That's Dennis Bond. So Joe Strauss had been speaker for many years and had some changeover there. And that kind of created a cascade effect throughout the House of Representatives where new committee chairs are getting named and new vice chairs, and people are kind of doing musical chairs. And that slows things down because people kind of have to get their feet under them. Specifically, if you look at like the Calendars Committee, which is the bottleneck, they set the schedule for the House floor. They had a new chairman, Representative Price out of the Amarillo area, after they'd had the same chairman for a very, very long time, and it had been Todd Hunter. And so that was a major changeover. Not only that, Calendars Committee actually changed its process up quite a bit. So there were, lobbyists were kind of running around saying, wait, how does this new process work? Help me understand that. And really, when you look over on the Senate side, right at the last minute, there was some shuffling of committee chairs and other committee assignments. And it happened so late in the game that it really left a lot of people scrambling. Most relevant to us was the Senate Health and Human Services Committee, because a lot of our bills would run through that committee, and that changed hands, and they had to hire new staff. And so things just ran pretty slowly for a variety of reasons.
Seemed like there was a lot more than just that of the changes we saw. Even on the House Health Committee, we saw some changes of the way, of creating the subcommittees, which we haven't had in the past. So it seemed like every one of the players that we had prepared for and talked to about this issue were kind of new faces, and they were all kind of switched around and changed around. So, and some of them we found out literally going into session. Some of them we didn't find out till a month or so, until they kind of got their assignments, and then they're trying to kind of get their staff together, and so it wasted a lot of time kind of in that process.
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Well, let's start with the TCA signature win for the session: Senate Bill 1739 with House Bill 1410. The provider discrimination bill with Governor Greg Abbott, he signed it into law on May 22nd, and it goes into effect on September 1st of this year. What did this bill accomplish, and what did it mean for chiropractors in Texas?
Absolutely. So this was an issue that was actually brought to TCA, I want to say maybe 2 Chiro Texpos ago. A lot of folks were talking about issues related to, say a physician or physical therapist will do something that's within chiropractic scope, and they'll get reimbursed for it. And if a chiropractor does that same procedure, again, in chiropractic scope, and bills insurance for it, that would get denied. And so there's a little bit of a challenge with this. There was an existing law in the books that prohibited this kind of discrimination for some types of insurers, but it really wasn't being enforced. And so what this bill did was added an administrative penalty and applied it more broadly to a broader set of health insurers. So basically now, beginning on September 1, like Dr. Carpenter said, if an insurer discriminates against a chiropractor for a procedure that is within chiropractic scope that they reimburse another provider for, they can be charged an administrative penalty up to $1,000 a day per claim. So it's a really significant penalty. It's an
epic penalty.
It is. It really is. That could add up very quickly. So our hope is that that penalty never even has to be applied, and that this change will encourage health insurers that are subject to this to pay chiropractors as they should. So anyway, so really big bill, and again, that was something that was brought to TCA by y'all. So I think we'll probably talk a little bit later about some things that you can do to get more involved, but this is a real product and demonstration of that, of when you guys raise issues and bring them to TCA's attention, how TCA acts. So
I think it says a lot more about what TCA's kind of direction is now. For I think years, many doctors kind of keep wondering, well, why are we going more offensive? Why are we kind of protecting our turf and making sure chiropractors are reimbursed and kind of getting our rights protected? And this was one of the many ways that we kind of went offensive. And it was a grassroots effort. It was something that kind of started, like you mentioned, at the grassroots. It was kind of brought up to our attention and kind of worked from there. And that's what we hope to continue to achieve with TCA's legislative team, is really getting the feedback from the doctors and seeing what needs to be corrected and fixed in the state, and really addressing those issues to make our practice better for all chiropractors in the state.
Absolutely.
And our patients.
I'm sure you guys are going to talk about a few more of these bills. The key bill for us that we were really trying to push was the nerve bill, House Bill 2733 and Senate Bill 1867. The nerve neuro bill. This bill faced lots of obstacles, and despite fabulous work by our legislative team and many of you on this webinar right now, we just couldn't get it going. We just couldn't get it passed. It just wasn't getting traction. We weren't getting votes in the right committees, and in fact, they buried it in the subcommittee, which made it almost impossible to get it out of. But if you guys could allude on some of that, tell us what happened there and what our future looks like for that bill.
Right. So we actually use some software called Telecom to track all of the bills that are relevant to chiropractic during a session, and it's got some cool features. One of them, it will tell you the percentage, the likelihood of passage for a particular bill given where it is in the process. And I believe the day that our nerve bill was sent to subcommittee, it said that we had a, what was it? Was it a 9% chance of passage?
Single digits.
It might have been 6% or something like that. And I think in retrospect, maybe even that was optimistic. We faced a lot of headwinds. When the bill got sent to subcommittee in the House, that was a killer. I mean, what a lot of people don't understand about the Texas legislature is, because of the time limitation and you're racing against the clock, any little thing you do that throws up a roadblock can kill a bill. And so when you hear, well, it went to subcommittee, that might be good. They might consider it closely in subcommittee. Yeah, but it's one extra step they're making you clear. And really in the Texas legislature, subcommittees are where legislation goes to die. And so of the bills that were sent to subcommittee, I believe only one actually passed. And that was the PT direct access bill that they'd been working on for over a decade. And it was seriously sort of modified before it finally passed even. So that was a major battle for us. You know, the tough thing, just to kind of let you into our thinking about the nerve bill, is that when we look back on it, we can't pinpoint a specific thing that that we as TCA did wrong for why it didn't pass, which is almost unfortunate because it's irritating to look back and to say there's not anything that we would have really done differently, and yet it didn't pass. And so the metaphor I like to use is it's like you're climbing Mount Everest. Sometimes you don't make it to the top, and it's not because you didn't plan correctly. It's not because you weren't in good enough shape. It's because you got crushed by an avalanche. And I feel like that's kind of what happened to us on the nerve bill.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think, you know, Josh spoke a lot about the House side with the subcommittee. On the Senate side as well, I think it was January 21st or 22nd, so even a couple weeks into the legislative session, there was a new chair appointed to the Senate Health and Human Services Committee, and as a result, a new staff over there who were playing catch up on a lot of this. And, you know, in fairness to them, we're playing catch up on a lot of issues. And so that kind of slowed us down over there as well. The bill did eventually pass the Senate Health and Human Services Committee, but by the time it got out of committee, it was really too late for it to make it.
And, you know, we, as your lobbyists, we always want to make sure that we're giving you our candid feelings about how things are going. And so we don't want to give you spin, but I do think in terms of the nerve bill, it's important just for perspective to kind of, you know, keep a good perspective on where we are. Dr. Mo, I like the way you talk about kind of how that, you know, it was, we had an opportunity to fix this and it didn't work, but kind of just where we are in terms of the nerve.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, I've heard from a lot of chiropractors, one session ended, really concerned about and kind of talking about this as a loss. I don't view this as a loss. I think this was just a kind of workaround that we were trying to do. I mean, the legal battle that we've been facing on neuro has been going on for several years now. So it's nothing new. It didn't start with this legislative session. And this was just a smart strategy that our lobbyists had put forth that would have basically not only dealt with this neuro issue, but would have dealt with any big other neuro issue moving forward. And it would have kind of stopped in its track, very similar to the approach we took with diagnosis last session. And you're absolutely right. I don't view it as a loss. You know, I think it was a very big challenge that we decided to take on. And realistically, it wasn't a loss because we did get it heard in the committee. We did get it past the Senate. We're going to have to go back and fight these battles again. So I think it kind of gives us a good starting point to kind of get back in there and deal with this next session. But it will be an ongoing battle that we will have to kind of resolve in the legislature, regardless of how this lawsuit goes. And I know we're going to talk a lot more about the lawsuit here in just a minute, but this is kind of linked in with that lawsuit. And it would have kind of put an end to it. Unfortunately, you know, kind of stop all this frivolous lawsuit and all this money that's being wasted, taxpayer dollars that are being spent on this issue, and a lot of chiropractors that are kind of donating to the TCA for this cause. And the legislators had an opportunity to really fix this issue and kind of move the state forward. But given the fact, I think there was so many new people that we hadn't really kind of discussed this with all the changes that happened with the speaker and the House and the Senate. It was just a lot of people that were kind of hearing it, kind of coming in just because they weren't on the health committee. So it hadn't been people we had been talking to. So it was an uphill battle from beginning. And I'm very proud of the work you guys did to kind of get it to the point we got it. I think everybody, including myself, would have loved to kind of get it over the hill. But, you know, legislative session, you know, usually you don't resolve something in one session.
I think the last thing I would just say about it, and this is really what we want all of TCA's members to hear from us, is that we left no stone unturned in our attempt to pass this bill. So, you know, there would be nights that you'd be sitting around and you'd say, well, what can we do? Well, I guess we could do X or Y. Well, that's probably not going to work. We'll do it anyway. I mean, we left no stone unturned. And so you can feel good that although it didn't pan out exactly the way we wanted it to, we really gave it all we had.
Hey, as we move forward, can y'all kind of give us an idea of some of the other TCA bills that we were trying to get passed?
Yeah, so on your screen right now, you've got a few that we worked on that didn't ultimately pass. I'll kind of recap those quickly. So HB 2151 and SB 1508. This is a bill that we got refiled by Representative Munoz and Senator Schwertner from last session. Basically, this would have prohibited post-payment audit extrapolations. The bill had really broad support from a lot of different providers. It passed the House. We actually got it amended onto another bill that passed the House, but ultimately, in either version, it didn't ultimately pass.
TMA actually worked with us to get that passed, and it was packaged, I guess, in with some other legislation, and then it ended up getting stripped out for political reasons that were really unrelated to our bill.
HB 201 and HB 741 below that are both also bills that we filed again from last session, or we asked legislators to file on our behalf. HB 201 would have added a chiropractor to the Combative Sports Advisory Board. That bill passed the House but died in the Senate. And HB 741, this is kind of down in the weeds, but there's a document that's given to an injured employee when they're hurt on the job that informs them of their rights. It lets them know that they can choose their treating doctor, but it doesn't specify that includes not just a physician, but chiropractor, podiatrist, optometrist, etc., obviously depending on the nature of the injury. So that passed the House as well, but died in the Senate. So those are 3 bills that we worked on that didn't make it to the governor's desk. A couple other things we worked on, though, that did have some success. So HB 1866, this is one we talked about a lot in prior town halls. This bill would have limited an opioid prescription for acute pain to an initial 7-day supply, and then it would have encouraged conservative care as well. The bill itself didn't ultimately pass, but that bill and 2 other opioid-related bills were harmonized when they were in the House Public Health Committee, and one of those other bills ultimately did pass. So that was...
so what that means is that some of the language from our bill was adopted into the bill that did ultimately pass. So although our bill wasn't the vehicle that ultimately, is getting signed into law, we had a pretty distinct impact on the bill that did pass.
Yeah, and it actually, arguably, the bill that did pass was more strict than our bill was. So again, the bill that we proposed would have limited an opioid prescription to an initial 7-day supply, but would have allowed a refill. This one, the one that passed, limits it to a 10-day supply, but prohibits a refill. So basically ensures people aren't just continuing to be provided opioids on an ongoing basis for acute pain. So we think that's a really positive change.
The other thing I would just say with respect to the opioid bill is that, there were some interim hearings about opioids, and everybody's all in a dither about what are we going to do about this problem. And early on, our docs, so Dr. Benton and Dr. Zielinski, were really the only people in these hearings that were talking about solving the problem at its origin point. Everybody else is concerned with what do you do after the fact? How do we address this opioid crisis now that everybody's addicted? But our doctors are the ones talking about how do we solve this problem at the starting point, over prescription, and conservative care for acute pain. And I just think that's a huge opening for us. Hopefully next session there's more that we can do on that issue, because I think it's a real political opening for us.
That was a very interesting debate, actually, when it happened, because like you mentioned, everybody came in talking about what other drugs do we give them once they're hooked, and just let's take them off this drug, give them this drug. And here comes the TCA talking about, why don't we just prevent this in the first place? And it's surprising that we were surprising to some, maybe not to us, that we were the only ones talking about, why don't we stop this from happening in the first place, rather than changing drugs and changing medications for these poor Texans that are getting addicted.
Yeah, that's a really big deal. I want to say like only 17 or 18 other states have a statutory limit like this, so this is an exciting bill. And then one other thing I'll point to, so House Bill 3194, this is probably one that y'all heard about a lot during the legislative session. It would have redefined acupuncture as incisive, which is, as there's a limitation in chiropractic scope on incisive procedures, that was obviously concerning. So we worked really hard this session to defeat that, and that bill ultimately died. So
I would say this is the second session in a row that we've had to kind of combat acupuncture, that the acupuncturists have really tried to kind of push chiropractors out of the profession. even though we've been doing it longer than they have in this state and have done it very, very safely with no incidents. So this was just another way of them trying to kind of basically create a medical monopoly for them in this. And TCA did a great job last session and this session, finding out about it, putting a stop to it kind of in its tracks, and preventing it from moving forward.
And
All right, is there? Go ahead.
I'll just say to that point, so, you know, a lot of what we did this session was a result of the work we did in the interim. And so 2 issues Dr. Mo just spoke to. One is we worked really hard in the interim to address the acupuncture issue. But one, if you're not aware of it, I know there was a lot of buzz going around about the work comp system and chiropractors' ability to be designated doctors in that and what that looked like. There was a really problematic rule proposal that came out. TCA worked really hard in the interim to address that issue, and it was ultimately addressed. So,
and I'll just be more blunt about it and say that the TDI's rules about designated doctors, both scope, they don't call it scope, they call it.
So real quick, can you say who TDI is? I know
The Department of Insurance. So the rules that they had promulgated for the proposed rules for the designated doctors, there was a rule about scheduling and a rule about scope. I think they call it qualifications. Right. They were some horrible rules, just really, really bad. And what ultimately got put into effect by the agency were some revised rules that were actually quite good. And there's one reason, and one reason only, that happened, and that was TCA's intervention. If not for TCA and the work that we did there, those rules would have been adopted, and they were very, very bad. So that's something that we're really proud of.
And that's important. TCA, we're not just here during legislative session fighting for advocacy. We're doing it year round. I know during the legislative session, things really heat up, and there's a lot that other chiropractors can really do to kind of assist in that process. But all throughout the year, we are working with kind of basically preventing chiropractic rights in the state. That battle has already kind of started. We've already started looking at our legislative session, which doesn't even start for another year and a half. So,
yeah. You know, a lot of people think that between sessions is the time to kick back and just try to enjoy the victory that we had and just kind of lay low until the next session in a year and a half from now. But can y'all kind of give us an idea what we need to start doing to prepare for the 87th session that's coming up in 2021?
That's probably a good question for Dr. Mo.
Well, there's a lot. The first thing we need to do to get prepared is, if anybody's on this call that's not a TCA member, the first thing you guys need to do is get on, join the TCA, and support your state association that's fighting for you on a basic daily basis to protect our rights. But really beyond that, really get engaged. Get engaged at the local level. We have different districts, 12 districts that cover the whole state. Every one of those directors and even the vice directors are very informed about what's going on, the battles that we're fighting, where the help is needed. So get involved at the local level. And then really the next step beyond that, right now, everybody just finished legislative session. They'll probably kind of sleep for a little bit. And actually, I literally just left less than 30 minutes ago a legislative event and legislative fundraisers. So the campaigns are already starting. I think there was literally 3 in the last week that I've been notified about. So get on Facebook, connect with your legislators, find out where their events are, connect with them, get to know them, find out how you can help them and how they can help us. Tell them about these issues that we're having. That's really how things get moving, is through the grassroots effort. You look at a lot of the bills that move forward, and a lot of the authors on those bills, they're people that we met and kind of have connected with through the grassroots, explained our situation and what's going on, and have made them passionate about it. You guys have to remember, a lot of these legislators well, first, there's no chiropractic legislators. 2, these guys are pulled from different walks of life, and they don't necessarily have the same passion that, you know, people watching on this and, you know, we have in this room for chiropractic. And we need to notify them of that. You know, some of these guys are attorneys, some of them are construction workers, there's farmers. I mean, they're guys that have nothing to do in the healthcare industry. So they have really no knowledge about what's going on. I was actually really surprised when we started, when I started 8 years ago in the legislature and went up there, how many of these guys didn't even know what our education entailed? And we actually spent a whole session literally educating them on our education and our qualifications. So I'm going to challenge all the doctors here that are watching this video to really get out, meet your legislators, and educate them on what they do. Invite them to your office, either for treatments, or if they don't, do want a treatment, at least show them the office, show them what you guys do, and have them talk to a couple of patients and explain how you guys have changed these patients' lives, and you've done it without the use of drugs and surgery, which is what the state needs more of.
Right.
One note I would.
No, go ahead.
One note I would make, and I mentioned it earlier, so Josh and I, or either together or separately, I think Dr. Moe, several other TCA leaders will be going around the state for the tour of Texas that Dr. Carpenter mentioned. I think last cycle, before the legislative session, we were asking for ideas, and we'll be doing the same thing this go around. So if you've got ideas, things that, insurance issues that affect your practice, scope of practice issues, work comp, whatever the issue is, please be thinking about those and bring those to us, either at those events, or you can email TCA.
And I would say do that as soon as possible, because we need a lot of lead time. The amount of research you have to do, to the prep work to get legislation together is very intense. Yeah. So the sooner you bring that to us, the sooner we can start working on it.
Yep. So anyway, that's just my plea, is please bring us your ideas.
All right. I want to address 2 questions. The first question is, what was our position on PT primary access, and how will we respond now that they have it? Is there one of you want to address that? I mean, I can tell you. I have a concern as leadership in TCA. I have a concern about the PTs getting more access than chiropractors. They already have more access, but we're also strategically trying to address these issues. And they're really, in this session, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but there was really nothing we could do to stop it. They made their own deal behind closed doors with the TMA, and they had their deal done without anything that we could do. But I'd like y'all's opinion on it too,
Sure.
Lobbyists and Mo.
Sure. So a couple of comments on it. So they've been working on this issue for probably a decade or so. And as I understand it, Texas was the last state to permit some sort of direct access.
We were the only state in the union that didn't allow some form of direct access.
So they have that, 10 years of lead time, and then some momentum nationwide going for them. I think the thing that's really important, though, to keep in mind is that, we're not operating in a vacuum necessarily. So none of these issues are, siloed and separate. And so the PT direct access bill got sent to the same subcommittee that our nerve bill got sent to. And so that was really where our focus was. The other thing I'll add, though, is, when we're talking with a lot of folks, chiropractors, there's a diverse opinion set on, PT direct access. And so TCA, the direction we were given was to basically just stay out of that fight. And so that's kind of what
and I think what you're getting at, and remember, we're just your humble lobbyists. We go where we're told to go. But, the point we always make is you have to be consistent in the things that you say you believe in and the things that you stand for. And if you're not consistent, people start to see through it, and they can tell that really you're just selfish and you're out for yourself, and they stop taking you seriously. And so when we tell legislators, look, we ought to be able to practice up to the level of our education and training. There's not a demonstrated safety risk. Look at what other states do. Patients have the right to choose, the healthcare of their choice. Those sorts of things. Sometimes it's hard to turn around and say, except as it relates to PT, So we're always pushing for consistency. And so I know there's some concern there. What they ultimately got was very limited. I mean, in some cases, I think it's like a day of direct access, depending on your training. So it's, I understand that there's some concern about it, but I think overall it was going to happen one way or the other. And, we're just trying to be consistent and focus on what's best for chiropractors.
Another question regarding PTs that was asked was, are PTs now able to provide a diagnosis and order imaging?
No diagnosis. I don't know.
I'm not aware of any changes to those rules at all.
I think the only thing it did, it just gave them basically 10 days that they can see the patient before they have to send for referral to, or 7 days or what?
Well, it's a stair step based on the level of training you have.
Yeah.
So some get up to 10 days, or I think it's 10 business days.
But 10 maximum days that they only get to work with the patient, and then they still have to go through the same process. This didn't affect their
I don't
scope of
think it
practice
changed
at
their actual scope in and of itself.
That bill did not. It did not.
Okay, a couple more questions. One that was asked, let me go to this other module here. If I have a relationship with a legislator, how do I share this info?
So please come to TCA office as soon as possible and share that info. You can always send an email to our lobbyist.
It's info@txstatecraft.com, info@txstatecraft.com. Send that to us, and we keep a master spreadsheet that contains all that information. Also, we keep it generally confidential, so it's not the kind of thing we advertise. It's just something that we use internally, and we use it very judiciously. So please let us know, because those contacts are key.
And if you do know me or have my cell phone or me on Facebook, you can always send me that message as well directly, and I'll make sure the gentleman get it.
Okay. Another question, could other healthcare providers be our friends in the future? And that's obviously yes. We may have to team up with other healthcare providers in order to make it better for all of us regarding TMA and their attack on everybody. Do you have anything to add to that?
I think we started that process this year. I'll let you guys talk about it, but you guys I know worked very closely with several of the other associations.
Yeah, I was actually just flashing back to when we were sitting across a table from Dr. Welch and a few others trying to get hired on as your lobbyist. And that was one of our core sort of foundational philosophies when we came on board with you all, is that coalitions are a force multiplier. And so, you know, there's only, you know, what, 4,000 or 5,000 chiropractors in Texas, but you've got a gajillion PTs and you've got optometrists and nurses. And even like on insurance matters, we work pretty closely, believe it or not, with TMA to get some of these insurance things passed because they're mutually beneficial. So we'll work with anybody when it's appropriate. And I think that for a group like us, that we're small, you know, we're smaller, it's even more important for us to play well with others. And so sometimes that is in a really obvious sort of structured way, sort of a coalition type thing. And other times it's just kind of behind the scenes. But we work pretty closely with the optometrists. They helped us a lot. We worked really well this session actually with the PTs. They did us several favors and they were very cordial. So we have a good relationship with most of the other groups.
Okay. As respecting everyone's time, we're going to move on to getting Matt Wood on with us. So let's turn our attention to TCA and TBCE versus TMA lawsuit. I want to introduce Matt Wood with Weisbart Springer Hayes. Matt is TCA's lead counsel. And Matt, can you tell us what's going on in this case and what happened last week?
Yeah, I sure can. So this is what's been called the VAUNT case, or in some cases, the NERV case. It is a case that's about whether the scope of chiropractic legally can include nerves at all. TMA's position is that nerves are essentially outside the scope and trying to limit chiropractors in Texas to just biomechanical conditions as they define them. And so this case has been being fought now for a few years. It went to trial in 2016. We did not get a very favorable judge. I don't think the judge understood really the nuances of these issues, of the nature of chiropractic, as the lobbying team was talking about. There's a lot of education that goes on, even in the courtrooms. And we then appealed that to the Court of Appeals here in Austin. And I was really hoping for a better result there, mainly because I thought that the appellate judges would give this the attention and the care that it deserves, given how important the issue is. And unfortunately, after that case was argued, all the judges lost re-election, and they were swept out in the blue wave that swept across the area around Austin in 2016. And so those judges started issuing decisions pretty quickly, and they rushed through, and we won on one issue there, though, and that was the diagnosis issue. And it was really because of the legislative changes that were made, not this session, but the one before, giving chiropractors the right definitively by law to diagnose. So where we are now is at the Texas Supreme Court, and we're trying to turn around those earlier decisions. And I finally feel like we have the audience we need. We have judges who I think are going to be engaged and really think through the implications of this decision, take the time to understand it. The big question mark when you get to the Texas Supreme Court, which is where we are now, is always, will the court take the case? It's completely their discretion what cases they take, like the U.S. Supreme Court. And so the big news last week was that the justices decided to hear our case. So fewer than 10% of cases get that kind of consideration. So we're moving ahead. It's a great sign. The court's interested. They generally don't take cases unless they think there's a decent chance that an error was made by the previous courts. And so we're now moving on to a stage where we're going to have a lot more opportunity to put the arguments in front of the justices and explain why nerves are not just part of chiropractic, but are at the core of chiropractic, that they are essential to practice. And so over the next few months, we'll be submitting more briefs. We'll probably have an oral argument at the Texas Supreme Court, maybe later this year, maybe early next year, and then hopefully get a decision. You know, it's hard to predict exactly, but maybe early to middle of next year at the earliest. So that's an update. Dr. Carpenter, any questions about that, or anyone has any questions from the audience? I'm happy to take them.
We know we'll open up for questions right now. If y'all have more questions, we can start asking those. I just want to tell Matt, thank you. I've been to some of the, I've been to the Third Court of Appeals hearing where, Matt, your ability to speak to the justices is at a higher, it's at a higher level than anyone else I saw in the courtroom. And so we really appreciate what you're doing for us. And I feel good about this. I feel good about where TCA is. I mean, this is, to me, is a clear case of monopoly on healthcare, and I don't know how to link it back to the Wilt case. And I know you probably don't want to touch that topic right now, but this is nothing different than what the ACA or AMA was doing against chiropractic early on.
Yeah, there's definitely a concerted effort going on by the Texas Medical Association and it seems the American Medical Association to watch regulations come out around the country and look for opportunities to launch legal challenges to those rules, to try to keep other professions, other healthcare professions, within whatever scope the physicians are comfortable with. And so they spend a lot of money doing this, and they watch carefully what regulations are coming down the pipeline. And they really did pounce on these regulations, what some people know as the VAUNT regulation, and then some other definitions that are at issue in these cases. And so it's really an ongoing struggle, basically continually with TMA, to fight to hold our turf. And that's what this case is about. And I would say that I think TCA's support has made a huge difference in this case. We're really the subject matter experts in this case. TMA is obviously biased, spinning everything as hard as they can in their favor. And, you know, the Attorney General's office represents the Board of Chiropractic Examiners, and they do a good job, but they really cover so many different areas. And chiropractic is not, for those attorneys at least, it's not their bread and butter. And so, you know, bringing in a legal team at TCA's behest, having the great support that I do from TCA leadership and others that are involved, I think really does help us break through the noise that TMA creates and send a clear message to the court about what chiropractors do, why this is important, and why we should win. One other thing that TCA did in this appeal that I thought was incredibly important was in the last month or two, there was a full court press made by TCA leadership to try to get other chiropractic organizations filing what are called amicus briefs. They're basically concerned parties who can submit a brief to tell the court why they think one side should win or why the court should take this case. And over the last few weeks, we had those briefs start to come in and the fruit was starting to bear. We had one by the Association, we had one by the Texas Chiropractic College, and we have a few more, I think, that are on their way. And incidentally, within a couple of weeks of those briefs being filed, the Supreme Court grants review. So, you never can say for sure what it was that put us across the line, but I think all these efforts combined absolutely made a difference and are putting us on a path that we're all very optimistic about.
So when we lost the Third Court of Appeals, one of the questions is, what does this mean with the DC's ability to treat nerve problems right now? Has anything changed?
So right now, that decision has not really taken effect. It's basically on hold until the appeal with the Texas Supreme Court finishes. And so right now, everyone in the state is still governed by the law as it exists and has existed for years. There are no changes.
Okay.
If there are going to be any, it will be after the Texas Supreme Court makes its decision.
Another question is, does requesting full briefing equate to taking the case? And that's an obvious no.
Yeah, well, so it's, Texas Supreme Court procedure is a little bit arcane. So technically full briefing is, you could argue, is not taking the case. They haven't granted the petition that we filed. But cutting through all the legal labels, I think the practical reality is here, we have a significant part of the justices interested in this case. They want to hear more. They're concerned that an error was made. And so we will get the court's consideration at this point. They are now considering the issues. Whereas before we got the news last week, it wasn't clear whether really anyone past their assistants or their clerks, staff attorneys, were really going to pay any attention to this case. So we have the court's attention, and that's really what matters.
Okay, and how is TCA gathering our witnesses for experts witness for this case that's going forward?
So at this point, we actually will not be using any more experts. The record that the Supreme Court will be considering was made at the trial, which was back in 2016. We have the opportunity to supplement with some treatises or some authorities that are in writing, but at this point, the record is closed to further live in-person experts.
Okay. Please post your questions if you have any more for Matt while we have them. We want to use this time as efficiently and effectively as possible. And this is also a time I want to go through a couple of other things with you guys while we're on here. And that's one of the questions, what can I do as a DC to help TCA in our legal defense? And I'm going to open this up to Dr. Mo to maybe respond.
So the number one thing right now that anybody can do is really get out and contribute to the PAC. The PAC is how we fund our political action committee. This is how we get our throw events for legislators and kind of meet legislators and kind of connect with them. It's one of the most important parts. If you look at the amount that we've raised over the last 2 sessions, you can almost put a direct connection between the amount raised and the legislation passed. So please, please, please contribute to the PAC. The PAC is really, really important between now and January. We need to really fill that up. We need well over $120,000 in that PAC to be able to have the success that we need to have for the 2021 legislative session. So first thing I would encourage everybody to do as far as legislation is concerned, contribute to the PAC. There is no amount of money too big for you to guys contribute. So please get on there and contribute. CDI, Chiropractic Development Initiative. This actually goes predominantly towards our legal defense fund. So once again, right now we got the Supreme Court that, as you can imagine, is going to accrue a lot of costs, legal and everything else. So we need those CDI funds to come in. so we can basically continue to fight the battle that we've been fighting. The way TCA is able to fight on y'all's behalf and do these things is really through the CDI and PAC committee, PAC funding. So we would encourage you guys to really get out there, contribute to both of those groups. And we also have what's known as the 100 by 100 Club. It's basically the elite chiropractors that want to get in there, want to show that they're committed to getting this problem resolved. You can do 100 by 100 to the PAC. You can do 100 by 100 to the CDI. Basically, we're asking you to contribute $100 to each of those every month. That's nothing for most of us out of our practice. $200, that's probably less than we spend on a single print advertising or a single advertising promotion that we're doing. Really, if you look at it, that's what TCA saved you guys over the years with reducing facility funding and everything else. So please, please get on there. Get on the 100 by 100. If you don't like the monthlies, get out there and make a big contribution to each of them on a one-time basis. But that's really the area that you can kind of get out and get involved and really help us to be able to push this further and further.
Okay. There was a question that was posted a few, probably 20 minutes ago, and that was, how can a medical doctor, how can they send money and support TCA? And before you answer that, I wanted to, I have several medical doctors I treat, and I was having a discussion with one of them a few weeks ago, and she was completely unaware of what was happening with TMA, not supportive of TMA's actions. And I'll tell you what, if these medical doctors, if the TMA actually worked towards helping their own profession improve their reimbursement, it would improve it for all of us. Instead, they spend all their money attacking everybody else. And so they can donate just like everybody else to the same funds that we accept through CDI donations, and it's tax deductible. But go ahead if you have any more.
You're absolutely right. They can always contribute to the PAC and CDI. Those are not limited to chiropractors, your friends, your neighbor, your patients, your kids, whoever wants to help the profession. You may have some patients that have really had life-changing experiences through chiropractic care. Please encourage them to get on there and contribute to these two. As far as doctors, especially if they do business with chiropractors as well, they can always become an affiliate member of the TCA. We also have friends of the TCA membership, so they can contact the TCA office and also basically become a member of the TCA, just not the same type of membership that we have for the chiropractors, but there is opportunities for membership for non-chiropractors with the TCA as well.
Okay. Another question, if we're looking at what other states do in regards to consistency, will Texas chiropractors re-seek physician status?
That's a complicated question. And the reason I say it's complicated is because in Texas, there are no code-wide definitions. So in one statute, physician might mean one thing, and in another statute it means something different. If you were to do just a blanket change throughout code and say every time we use the word physician we're talking about chiropractors, that could be frankly pretty bad for you guys, because there's a lot of there's good and bad that comes with being called a physician in statute. So separate training they have to do, other requirements, other fees, and things like that. So it's sort of it's just a tough nut to crack. I don't know, do you have anything to add on
Well,
that?
and then the alternative is if you just change the language in the Chiropractic Act, instead for purposes of this, you can call yourself a physician. For purposes of the Chiropractic Act, you can call yourself like a chiropractic physician. The challenge with that is what does that really mean? What
practical benefit
Right.
does it afford you, other than status and
Sure.
stature, which is not insignificant, obviously.
So anyway, so that's that. What I would say again, though, is to echo Josh, we don't call the shots. We run the plays once they're assigned to us. So we defer to y'all on those issues.
I think, it's we got to pick our battles. I'd love to, do a lot of things for, as far as what the chiropractic profession is concerned here in the state of Texas. But we do have limitations, as we kind of saw, with neuro this session. Even though it makes a lot of sense, we didn't, run into really too many people that were like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. But you still run those legislative battles. And just at the neuro level, this, by the end of session, became TMA's #1 top priority bill that they were basically fighting against because of the momentum we were getting. So I think it would just create more challenges. And I would say that's something we would need to battle after we kind of deal with the neuro issue. Because that would just basically take up all the oxygen in the room and all of our energy, which is somewhat part of the reason some of those other bills that you guys saw that made it through the House, we basically, through session, decided that neuro was the #1 issue. And if we needed to let, put all our effort, energy into that neuro issue and let some of these other things that maybe weren't as high of a priority for us kind of sit in the back burner, we have to do that. And I think to try to battle neuro and physician status, which are two really big challenges, would be overwhelming, honestly.
Okay, we're going to do one last question. There's a question here posted. Isn't the physician status a federal issue?
So, well, to a degree, yes. So chiropractors are physicians under Medicare and Medicaid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so yes to that issue. Generally, though, each state defines, what is and isn't a physician. Last I checked, I think it was like 35 or 6 states that have laws that, include a chiropractor in, some form or fashion in the definition of physician. So sort of yes and no. It is left to, there are federal statutes and regulations on that. But generally it's left to the state to determine, who can use that terminology.
Okay. Well, we're going to wrap this up. We've gone for 1 hour, and I just want to thank Matt Wood. Thank you for being here with us today. Thank you to our lobbyists. Thank you during the session to Parker, TCC. I want to also say thank you to all the folks that joined us for Legislative Day before legislative session started. We could not do this without you. And I just want to reiterate something that everyone that's part of this, as far as chiropractors on TCA, we're all practicing chiropractors just like the rest of our state. And so we are definitely representing you. We have our practices to run during the day. So this is all volunteer time, but we need you to be part of what we're doing. We can't do this without you. We can't do this without your support financially. And I can't thank you enough. And as we get to closing, I'm just wanting to make sure I'm answering all these questions that people who testified. Yeah, I mean, we had a number of people. If I start naming names, I'm going to leave someone out, and I'll have hell to pay tomorrow for that. But we had a lot of people that left their offices and actually closed their doors and actually stopped having income on certain days to go to Austin and testify during our hearings for all of these bills that we were pushing. And that takes a lot to do. All I'm asking for you right now is to support us. Join the 100 by 100, join TCA, become a premium member, come to our events, support us in every way that you can. And I just want to put your, just to know that you can trust us and we are fighting for you, just like you. And so a lot of times we hear the negative side of things. If you have anything negative that you'd like to see changed, send that to me personally. I'm your president this year. Send it to the office, the TCA office with Jeff. We will try to address anything that we have the control or power to. And we're here for you. And so please reach out to the office. If you're not a TCA member, don't forget to join. If you're not contributing, please start. And we hope to see you at the TCA Tour of Texas in the near future, in the next 3 months. We have a lot of events coming up. So I just want to thank you guys. Thank you for being here. Enjoy the rest of your evening.